Thank you, members, for all of your questions just then. Before this item concludes, one of the members has made me aware that they would like to put forward a proposal based on the discussions we've just had. Councillor Jeremy, your proposal wording, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I was reading our terms of reference, and item 10 gives us the ability to make reports or recommendation to Cabinet on matters which affect the authority's area or inhabitants of the area. And I think we can all agree that devolution has an effect if it were to go ahead or not. So I'd like to propose that the Commission believes that the benefits of devolution for Breckland residents are unclear, and we have concerns about the proposal. Overview and Scrutiny Commission requests that Cabinet undertake a review of the benefits and attempt to make clear to full council what those benefits are. Further, OSC requests that Cabinet commits to full council being permitted a vote on whether there is support for the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Burt. Does anyone wish to speak on this proposal? Sorry, 1 second. I just have.
No, just to make members aware, and I'm not sure it materially affects this, but a report is, the intention will be to bring a report forward with a response on behalf of this authority to the consultation period. I don't think that's inconsistent with what we've proposed, but I just wanted to make you aware the intention was always to bring forward a draft response for consideration by members on how we respond as an authority to the consultation period that's just been described.
Terry, would you be happy for that proposal to be amended such that any full council vote took place after such a consultation response was provided in Norfolk County Council? Okay, fine. So carrying on then, Peter, I think you were going to speak. Very good. Any other members wishing to speak on this? In which case, could I see all those in favour of that proposal, please raise your hands. And those against? I don't think that carried. Sorry, can I just have in favour again, please? And those against. So that has fallen.
You got an abstention.
And I've got an abstention there. And Robert, did you abstain? And I abstained. So that has not been carried. Are there any other proposals from the floor? Otherwise, I will conclude this item. All right, thank you very much. Item 6 is non-members wishing to address the meeting. I've not been advised that any members want to address the meeting under this item. As always, any members are welcome to speak under any item in this meeting. Item 7 is the Q3 performance report. Councillor James, are you doing the introduction to this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to bring the Q3 performance report to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee today. I will just highlight some areas of note, if I may. Overall, there have been areas of positive performance during Q3, most notably with regards to customer contact calls, which I know you'll all be very pleased about. Those on the committee will know this has been an area where the council has struggled in recent years, and we've been slowly seeing improved levels since the service review a few months ago. The reason that I'd like to draw the committee's attention to this specifically relates to where we were 12 months ago compared to now. The team has successfully managed to reduce the number of days where it was unable to meet 90% of the calls by 29 days. And I think this is a real testament to the work that has been put in to improve this area. However, there is still work to be done here, but I do think this demonstrates that we are heading in a positive direction. The other area that I'd just like to draw your attention to relates to complaints and freedom of information requests. Last quarter, we struggled in these areas, and as a result, changes were made to the current processes in order to improve those response times. Whilst freedom of information requests have stabilised, the council has had a challenging quarter in relation to complaints responded to in time. Whilst it should be noted that the other half of this indicator related to how many complaints we upheld has fallen during the same period, further work does need to be done to ensure that this indicator returns to its normal level. And Ryan can update you all more on this if required. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are you speaking, Ryan, or are we going to?
Only one minor point to pick up, Chairman, just around page 19, where we've got on the RAG rating 6 red, 3 green. It's in fact 3 red and 6 green.
That
So-
makes a material difference. Thank you. Okay, questions from members. Tim,
Chairman, I've got 5.
go on, hit us with
Do you want-
3.
You want 3? Okay. So let's start page 23, please. The food standard rating. So I've spoken to some people that were involved in this, and it turns out actually it's not that difficult to achieve a 5, certainly for new installations. It's sometimes with older buildings that there are problems, which might mean that the constraint that it's only possible to achieve a 4. So my first question would be, why is our KPI regarding generally satisfactory as an okay target? The other thing is in the detail of the text on this one. I mean, we have asked, and it's been agreed that we'll get figures for all 5 ratings, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, but that's not been reported in the text of this one. So why not? Incidentally, I've been to the Food Standards Agency, and I've got the figures. So rating of 2, there's only 2 premises, and a rating of 1 is 9. But I would suggest that that is actually crucial information for our district, because that is to do with the safety of people using these establishments. So we do want to be reporting that, not just the good ones. Second question. Number of enforcement actions, just on page 24. Just for some clarity, please, on exactly what's being measured, because in the Q3 column, it says that there are 7, but in the text, it talks about 12 warning letters and 9 fixed penalty notices. So can I have some clarity about what we're actually calculating there? Got a third one?
Go on, third question.
Okay, again, page 24. Gas usage, which is at the top of the page, it's gone up by 50%, but there's no explanation why or a plan to reduce it. Now, COVID might have had a tiny bit to do with it, but it had already been declared as over. The building was open and in use in Q3 of 21-22. So that is a highly dramatic increase in our carbon emissions, yet there's no explanation within the report. Can we find out what's going on, please?
Thank you very much.
If I could pick up on the first point, page 23, the food standards rating. Whilst I appreciate the point that you're making, Councillor Burt, actually saying that we need more information, but when we've given you the full breakdown for that reference as a link seems odd. So the information is provided. If you want us to be explicit, then we'll review KPIs, but these are the KPIs that have been agreed, or have I misunderstood your point?
So the link actually takes you to the site, but you can't, it's not that easy to get the information. It's in an XML file. If you don't know how to read an XML file, you're going to struggle.
So I think the question is, would it be easy for us to provide that information in the box?
I mean, ultimately, we put this here because we thought it was going to be an easier alternative. But if it's not, I'm happy to go back to reporting the 2 and the 1 star then in the text. This was so because sometimes we do get requests for information around specific areas and stuff like that. We've been asked to the committee, so we thought by giving the link, which would allow members to look at that, that might be a simpler way to deal with some of those. I appreciate your point, Councillor, but we can include the 2 and the 1 star within the text moving forwards. If I can just pick up the other ones now, so the enforcement areas one. So it's 7, but as we say, I think it's just at the bottom of that page, it's 7 included amongst general activity. So the bit below we talk about the 12 and the 9, that's the 7 is within that general activity that we're talking about. And your last point was just on gas usage. So ultimately, some of those buildings are tenanted buildings. So, you know, we don't have a position to dictate to people their gas usage. But what I would point out is that we were very low last quarter, which was notable. So we can look into that as to whether the reason why we've risen so high this quarter is as a result of perhaps underreporting last quarter. We did recheck the bills last time because it was, I think, pointed out by Councillor Morton as well, Cabinet, about how low it was. So that's my understanding of that. We can look into it again, but ultimately your point on sort of usage is covered under that 2035 annual report, which includes the carbon footprint.
Thank you. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, the difference I was looking at was between Q3 last year and Q3 this, or 21, 22 versus Q3 22, 23. So they are comparable. You're looking at this extremely low figure for the last quarter. That's not the reference that I was making.
So I guess the question is, do you know what the difference is, the 50% increase between the year-on-year figure?
I don't, but I can look into that if that's
Very
what the
good.
committee would like.
Thank you. Any other questions from members on the report? Otherwise, we'll go back to Tim's other two questions. I want to give other members a chance to get in there first if they wish to. Peter?
I'll just say I find the links quite easy and straightforward, and you get more information having a link rather than having another 5 or 6 pages possibly given to you. You know what I mean? That's what Councillor Burt was referring to. Press the link, they open the pages up, and there's the information you need, extra information. Straightforward as I can see it.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Tim, what are your other two questions?
Okay, page 27. This is Freedom of Information Act. So this is sort of a bit of a bugbear because this is a statutory obligation on us. So to not actually be able to achieve that is troublesome. So what is it that consistently is meaning that we are not able to comply with our statutory obligation? And are environmental information regulation requests also included within this, as well as FOIs? And the last question on page 28, which was complaints, which I think you've already discussed partly. The text talks about fixes being put in place to address a dip in responses, and then further issues, but it doesn't specify what those further issues are or any solutions. So it's difficult to scrutinise the position that we're actually in to know where we're going to go and what we need to do. The text also mentions above normal numbers of complaints. You have to ask the question then, why are there above normal numbers? Because if somebody goes to the trouble of making a complaint, and it is quite difficult to go through the process of making a formal complaint, some things are likely to be wrong somewhere, and yet we're not able to see from this where that somewhere is and the extent of what that might be and what it might reflect on other things. For example, our budget. Are we correctly budgeting for certain statutory obligations that isn't sufficient?
So the only thing I'd say before we go for the, I think your questions are sound. The only thing I'd say is I don't think that we're ever going to expect the text to tell us everything. The whole point of this committee meeting is that we look at the KPIs and then we probe into them. So I think the questions are sound. I don't think we as a committee should be expecting that all of your questions should be answered before you ask them. And I doubt we would ever reach a situation where that happened anyway, Tim. So Jane and Ryan on Tim's 2 points.
I mean, if I pick up on the complaint side of things, I mean, you're absolutely right. And it's a challenge that I've put back as portfolio holder, as you would rightly expect. So we've had the conversations, what is happening? Are there trends that are occurring? Is there intervention that we can put in? And the conversations are happening at the moment to identify those and see what we can put into place to rectify those. There is a specific service area that appears to be challenging at the moment, but we're doing greater analysis to make sure that we're not heading off down the wrong path. And you're absolutely right regarding the budgetary implications. What does that look like? So I am asking those questions. Ryan, is there anything further you'd like to pick up on that side of things?
I'll just pick up the FOI point around environmental information requests. I'm not sure whether that's captured in that, so I'd have to go away and check that. I think ultimately the FOI thing, whilst I agree there is a statutory one compared to complaints, I'm less worried about that just because of the drop off that we're seeing. I mean, in the FOI one, we've done 233 out of 245 this year, and compared to the level we've seen drop in complaints, that's one more. concerned around that. I think what we are seeing in terms of delays is around high demand areas and high demand teams in the council are getting more complaints coming in. There's a perception thing of people being wronged, but my understanding in certain teams is people are putting that in because they're waiting for stuff to come back, and essentially it's a case of people using the complaint system in order to try to get an update on proposal or information they're expecting from the council. So it's something we are looking at within those teams. Ultimately, it's an area where, you know, consistently we've managed to perform fairly well there before. So it's disappointing to have this level of drop off, but I think we can get it back to a place of sort of 90 to 100%.
Thank you. Tim, do you have any final comments you wish to make?
Well, a request, please. Could you come back to OSC with actually an explanation of what it is? So you're doing the investigation now. Can we have some feedback so that we've got some confidence this is actually going to be fixed?
Thank you. Roy.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask the cabinet member, since she's taken over this portfolio, I see there's been several things that have improved. The team seems to be working very well together, and I would ask her, A, if she happy with the way things are going, and are we going in the direction of the KPIs, because it appears that we are, and does she feel that there's anything that she needs to help her? Thank you.
Cabinet member.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for your kind words, Councillor. I can't take full credit for the positive trajectory that many of these things are progressing on. The work of the team, you know, is fundamental in that. We have good, robust conversations, and my predecessor in the role also had those good, strong, robust conversations. And I'm grateful actually to the support of this commission, because yeah, it makes me think about things differently, and I do appreciate that. We're getting there. There's always room for improvement, and many of you will know one of my favourite phrases is "would be better if," and I'm always focused on that. So thank you. There is always room for improvement, but I do feel the trajectory is correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions from members? Otherwise, we will note that report. Thank you very much. That report is noted, which takes us on to item 8, the draft budget, medium-term plan and capital strategy 2023-2024, presented by Councillor Cowan. Phil, enlighten us. Well, we're already enlightened, but you know, give us more information.
Enlightened to some extent after this morning's interesting proceedings, Chairman, certainly. Okay, I'm going to present this in a similar way to that which I presented at Cabinet, and forgive me, those members who attended Cabinet will have heard a lot of this before. But there's also going to be a little, my colleague on my right has just been busily playing with the keys, because as budgets, as we've heard many times, are to some extent a bit of a guesstimate based on information that might be available or is unavailable. There has been a 11th hour change, which arrived late yesterday afternoon from our dear colleagues in Westminster. So we'll come to that in a moment. So at its heart, budgeting is a relatively simple exercise. I've stressed simple in the context of what you're about to hear, in balancing known and assumed or sometimes unknown or anticipated variables against a set of choices that we as councillors make. And it's those choices within the equation over which we have discretionary control that in turn sets us on a course of action to establish a budget for the coming year. This process is what all of us do in one form or another when we run our private lives and our households, and thus the principles are pretty familiar to all of us. And what places this council's budget setting on a different level from domestic models are the choices that we as councillors make, the complexity of the income streams that are involved. Frankly, unless we're Jeff Bezos, the monetary values involved, and the statutory or core services that we're tasked with providing. So this council has established key overriding priorities or choices
in addition to the statutory services against which our budget must provide funding. And these are well known to all of us. They're inspiring communities, thriving places, our Breckland 2035 ambition, working smarter, and Breckland Cares. Following the trials and tribulations of the pandemic, the impact on residents and businesses alike, and the additional load placed on officers and members as a result, all set against the backdrop of world events, has given the budget setting process this year a more sharply honed focus, and more of that later. Many authorities around the country have found themselves in untenable positions. Their finances have been stretched and in some cases compromised, but I'm pleased to announce today, as I did at Cabinet, that as a result of the detailed work undertaken by Team Breckland, this council can propose a balanced budget. And it's not only balanced for the year ahead, but also subsequent year. This is an achievement of which all of us can be justly proud. And the papers that you have before you today set out in detail the ways in which the draft budget has been established. Appendix A sets out the general principles behind the budget and identifies income levels, fixed costs, the tax base, the budget preparation principles and assumptions, forward projections and reserves and balances, all set against a risk profile. It also sets out the consultation timetable. And I think in this case, it is a consultation timetable. Value for money requirements and addresses the capital estimates. Appendix B lists the summary by a subjective heading, and Appendix C identifies the task base by parish. D1 sets out proposed fees and charges for the wide range of services provided by the council, and Appendix D2, the planning fees. Appendix E identifies reserves. Appendix F addresses the sensitivity analysis against which various assumptions have been made. And the capital strategy and programme is set out in Appendices G and H. This is a positive budget statement and places Breckland Council in an enviable position. Yes, the Band D tax level is proposed to rise to £108.63 per year. But within Breckland, as we do know, some 76% of homes are within bands A to C, and thus the majority of households who pay the full amount of council tax will pay less than £1.86 a week for the statutory services, and importantly, the discretionary services that this council provides. I'm indebted to the hard work of Team Breckland as a unit, who have worked together to drive this draft budget forward. The fact that we can deliver a balanced budget in these straitened times, whilst providing all of the core services that our residences and businesses require, and at the same time providing a wide range of discretionary services designed to help and support the most vulnerable, is testament to the prudent fiscal policies that this council has been following. I set out at the beginning of that piece the fact that we had an 11th hour addition to our budget. And that is that central government advised us yesterday afternoon of additional funding that's come our way as a result, as you'll hear from my colleague Alison, of business rate information. I think it's important that we tell you what that is right now, although I will presage that by saying there's not an awful lot we can do constructively at this late hour. Normally, this sort of information arrives at this office pre-Christmas. But given our timetable to get to the draft budget discussion and debate at full council, the consultation process which has been carried out thus far, it means that we have to make some assessments as to how the additional funds that you'll hear about in a moment will be allocated. So Alison, before we go into talk about detail, would you kindly identify those particular windfalls, let's put them that way, that have come our way? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, as Councillor Cowan says, there was a last minute thing yesterday. We've been waiting for the information on business rates, which we had to send to government by the end of this month. We've had some more challenges than normal this year because of the new valuations from the 1st of April, which is a big exercise alone. And then alongside that, our software provider hadn't managed to provide the fix for the software for the new transitional reliefs. which have changed this year from government. And there's a lot of software changes for various things this year. So it's been much delayed. So we got that last night. It is subject to final checks because it is so last minute. But if what we have received is correct, then we will be receiving additional income in business rates above that, which is in this draft budget, of around £500,000 next year and a further £1 million the year after. Now, those are significant values, and we wouldn't normally bring them this last minute. The big check we need to carry out is about the likelihood of appeals on these, because these are all increases to rateable values. So we may need to increase our appeals provision. But due to the lateness of this and the fact that there's very little time to debate it at the moment, what we'll be suggesting is that in the Cabinet report and the Council reports that will come forward again through February, we will be contributing those two amounts into a reserve so that there's time for us to think in the future how we can use those to support the Breckland area and residents to the best. And again, these are only fixed term, it's only for the next 2 years. So they're not long-term funding, which is just something that's important. Thank you.
Thanks, Alison. It is unfortunate, colleagues, that this information has come to us so late in the day. But I think the suggestion that we actually put the money into reserves for the benefit of Breckland community as a whole, for us as a council to determine how that money is allocated in the fullness of time, is probably the right and proper and only way that we can deal with it at this moment in time, given the statutory time periods within which papers have to be produced for Cabinet and for Council relating to what is probably for most residents the most significant debate and discussion we have as a council. So thank you, Chairman. I'll leave it at that and we'll offer colleagues the question I'm sure they wish to ask.
Thank you. The catechism begins. So Tim, then Harry, and then Terry. Go ahead, Tim.
How many shall I start with? I've only got 3.
Start us with 2.
Well, there you go. It's interesting, you mentioned a few times, Councillor Cowan, about proudly saying a balanced budget, but of course it has to be a balanced budget. We don't have any choice in that matter. I would say you're going to expect this question because this is the same one that I've brought up year after year. So it's on page 38. There's a bar chart comparing different council tax rates, but it excludes the parish precept. Is it a fair comparison between Breckland and Great Yarmouth, being as in Great Yarmouth they don't have a parish precept? That you were expecting. Page 44. I've noted that the cost of living increase was specified at 2% for 22-23. We've discussed that before. And it's been raised to just 3% for 23-24. So why are we budgeting for such a low figure when the Bank of England predictions are so much higher, and we have already seen the damage that it's done in terms of costs, with the inflation rate being over 10% now?
Thank you. Phil.
Yeah. I'm still playing with the machine. Excuse me a second, Chairman. Well, the answer to your first question, Tim, you said I wouldn't be surprised if you asked it. You won't be surprised at my response either. It is fair. It is a very fair comparison to make. There is no question about it by any measure that we use as a council, not just us, but central government as well. This is a very fair analysis to make. So I make no apology for that. It is what it is. You asked the second question about inflation, cost of living, and so on and so forth. I will defer to Alison on my right, because she is the keeper of those particular facts and figures. So Alison, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you. So the cost of living increase is an estimate that we put in each year. It's not set in stone. It's subject to negotiation with Unison and staff each year. It's only part of the salary increase. So what you don't see there is that staff receive an increment each year. And that brings the actual cost of living up to sort of 7 to 8 to 9%, depending on where they are in the grading band. So that is purely the cost of living. On top of that, staff will automatically get their increments each year, which significantly increases that percentage.
Does that answer your question, Tim?
It does partially on the cost of living. It's not going to come as any surprise to you that I disagree with your fair assessment. I believe that you are comparing apples with oranges, and that is not a fair comparison. On the cost of living, I just wanted to know where the numbers had come from. Are you saying then that with a band increment plus 3% gets you to where the real cost of living increase is?
I think what I'm saying is there is more to our pay award than simply that cost of living percentage that's in there. So there is the additional increment, there are all the other benefits that staff get as well, and that's all part of the pay negotiation.
Thank you. I guess one pertinent point is Norfolk County Council staff are being awarded an extra day's holiday. Clearly that won't show up in your pay stats, but that is no doubt a real cost. So, you know, you can play games with numbers depending on how benefits work. I've got Harry, then Terry, then Roger. So Harry.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much, Councillor. Thank you, Phil, for your excellent and concise presentation as usual. I've got two questions. One is relating to detail, and one is more of a suggestion. And I think your answer may be possibly aided in one of them by the other Alison, the member for Communities and Health, possibly. So I'll give my two questions, and in fact you can then both respond. The first one is, I've read through all the 8 appendices, if we're pleased to hear. Have you made any assumptions in there in terms of capital expenditure income in respect of fees for car parking charges anywhere in Breckland in the financial year going forward? So that's the first question. The second one is, we've talked a bit about the discretionary areas of the corporate priorities, none of which I'm particularly disagreed about, and obviously fully supportive of them. But I think I certainly, as this member is concerned, I think it'd be helpful under and again, I'm sure that Councillor Webb will put me right or educate me if I've got this wrong, but I certainly think at this scrutiny committee where we've got discretionary areas, it's useful to make sure we've got KPIs around, say, inspiring communities, thriving and thriving places, because some of those things, whilst they've agreed, I don't disagree with those as a priority, it's very helpful to make sure we've got those there. So whilst we're doing lots of areas where we're doing good work, we can say, well, if we've reached 40 villages and we've got 80, then we're halfway there. So we're getting an idea of where we're on track of what we've set out to do, a bit of a harder edge in it. So it's not knocking what is actually being done, but getting a sort of harder edge of where we're going forward. So thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Phil, then Alison.
Yeah, well, thanks, Chairman, and thank you, Harry, for those questions and the commentary as well. So I think your first question was about car parking charges looking ahead in next year. The answer is no. The second question, which I'll defer to Alison shortly, relates to perhaps KPIs for non-statutory services and duties that we are obliged to perform. It's very difficult actually sometimes to set out KPIs for things that are discretionary and will vary over time, because priorities by simple definition have a habit of changing, not just year on year perhaps, but within year as well. So it's not always possible to establish KPIs. However, I can assure you, and Alison I'm sure will support this with a bit of detail, that those priorities that we've looked at through things like Inspiring Communities are really front and center of what we're trying to achieve. And there are some very interesting facts and figures that I know are available from Sam Armitage, which I'm sure Alison will be able to supply you with if that's what you require. But we do take that very seriously. It's not something we just have as a throwaway add-on. They really are fundamental to the way we look at how we manage and deal with challenges and concerns that residents and businesses, to some extent, need us to in the district. So thank you. Alison, do you want to?
Thank you, Councillor Clark, and thank you very much for saying about the good work that Inspiring Communities is doing and continues to do. Right, communities are like a jelly. They move, they expand, they contract their needs all the time. And we and the team move to actually take care of them. So putting a marker in the sand is really, really difficult. We've been extremely successful with Inspiring Communities. Chairman, I would like to suggest that what might be a nice idea is we have a presentation about where we are with Inspiring Communities and where we're going in the future. It will give an idea to members of what we've achieved to date and what we're achieving going forward, what our targets are and what we're looking at. Inspiring Communities was not just one thing that's going to last for this period of our thing. It's something that's actually in the system to go forward. I'll give you one example. The Silver Service, which is basic Silver Social, not Silver Service, I've gone into food, I'm getting hungry. Right, okay, so Silver Social, we used to actually fund. We've passed it across to an organisation who are now in the stage to be able to bid for funding to continue that Silver Social, that very important link with our elder people, our older people in the communities, and it's really needed. And that's a good example of what we've done with Inspiring Communities. So, Chairman, I'd like to suggest that sometime when you get a little slot for us, we come and do a presentation on what we've done and what we're planning to do and what the legacy of Inspiring Communities means.
Thank you. Your suggestion is noted and I will ask the committee under the work programme if they'd like to include it. Harry.
Just to say, I'd welcome Councillor Webb's suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, Phil, you're welcome back to Scrutiny with last minute information as often as you like, so long as it's good news. If you come and tell us bad news, we won't be so pleased. But no, that is good news, so I'm very pleased to hear that. I've got 3 points. The first 2 are on Appendix 9, I think it is, the capital receipts and expenditure. And you'll see in the table there a line for disabled facilities grants. We had a really good debate, I thought, at full council in December, and we've debated it here at Scrutiny, and there is much more awareness, I think, now of disabled facilities grants. And I read the report here, I'm trying to find my line again, DFG, yep. The budget for them is the same for each of the next 10 years. 1329644, because that's what we are presumably, and I very much hope pessimistically assuming we're going to get from the government. I know there's a review going on, but I just want us to all be aware that if that is indeed the case, what that ultimately will mean is far fewer adaptations taking place because of the cost of inflation, and it's always going to be more expensive. So that for me is a real concern, our ability to get those adaptations done. And I just wanted to flag that. I hope when the review concludes, there will be some more money coming from government to top that up. But to see that line the exact same over every year for the next 10 years is a concern, frankly. The other line was the Breckland Bridge small sites. And I don't know how many sites are included in that capital receipt total at the top. Whether that's the total of all small sites. But what strikes me is that's a relatively small amount of money for a significant amount of hardship, concern to those communities that are affected. My ward hasn't got any sites identified on the list. There's not a lot to be built on, frankly, in Borough Ward. But there are other locations in Thetford where some very much loved, very well used, important local green spaces potentially are going to be developed for very little return for this council. If you look at the figures in here, and I don't know if the cabinet member wants to comment on that, but in the grand scheme of our capital budget, and in light of the fact that we're getting this additional money, I just really wonder if that represents best value for those residents, given what's going to be lost. It's a really small amount of money, and I just wonder why we're focusing on doing that, frankly, when we're in a relatively healthy position. And the last point I was going to make about council tax and the hardship fund, very pleased to see that we're maintaining funds to support people with council tax. I think it's crucial. I have a lot of concerns about the way the hardship fund is administered and applied. I don't think as a council we should be continuing for that to be administered by ARP. I think it should be done by the team that we've just heard about, Inspiring Communities, who've done a fantastic job with the Household Support Fund. I think their systems and ways of working are more geared to administering that council tax hardship fund. And I would just plea that if we're making money available for the next financial year, that we review how that is administered. And I think a change would be beneficial to residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil.
Thank you, Terry. Well, DFGs, prior to the start of this meeting, not this bit, but the start of the whole meeting, I do know that Gordon, wherever he is, he's over there, he's right behind you, was talking to our county council colleagues about the potential for us to do more. But we are somewhat hamstrung in what we can do, given some of the constraints around the governance and the procedures that we have to work within. But I don't think any of us disagree with you in what you're saying, that it'd be really good if we could do more and broaden the ability of us to spend on DFGs in the broader sense, whether it's from putting a handle on a bathroom to building ramps and refurbishing and providing wet rooms where bathrooms previously existed, for example. There's a huge range of stuff in there. And I know that Gordon is very keen to push the envelope, let's put it that way, so that we can do more and more if those governance arrangements and the means by which the money is transmitted to us by county or others is altered. So I don't think we disagree with what you're saying. We do what we can do within the terms of reference that we are provided, and therefore the funding which is passed down to us, because it's not our money. The money, we're just basically passported the money from others to do what we do. Perhaps that's something that county need to look at, Terry, wearing your other hat. I don't know. So that's the first one that you raised. The small sites across the district, that's down there. My colleague on my far right, I'm sure would want to have a little discussion with you about that. But I would just point out as well that the local plan consultation document, which is out at the moment, actually does focus on the very point you've raised, which is not just where would you like to see and what kind of development you might wish to see, but what kind of development would you not wish to see, and more importantly, what priorities would you put on open space and green space in our communities, because that's part of that consultation process, and will obviously help to inform it. We'll defer to Paul in a moment. And as for the hardship fund, now the hardship fund is administered, as you rightly say, by ARP. Now, ARP don't just manage that on behalf of Breckland Council, but all the other councils as well. And they don't do it by sort of sticking, as you would imagine, a wet finger in the air and having a little guess as to what might be the most appropriate. It's all driven by data. And the data sets that they work to are shared and can be shared. And no doubt Alison's team and our ARP team do talk to one another. We can certainly have a conversation with them about whether there are other ways or better ways or more relevant ways of actually managing that fund. But I do know the amount of fund that is handled is quite significant. So, for instance, in terms of council tax relief by volume, there's 3,818 pensioners who benefit from that. 2,500 nearly by 100%. So we do have that information, and it goes down, it breaks down into other categories as well. But I'm happy to take that back with ARP and Alison's team and have a conversation. But Paul, you might want to come in on the small sites.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Councillor Jeremy. It probably comes as no surprise. I thought actually what your question about small sites was going to be was more positive, because actually it reflects the disposal programme that you as members have had, that we've demonstrated quite closely, which is the whole point about the small sites disposal programme, is not a money-making exercise at all. For every one of the small sites, we've got thousands of pieces of land in the district. The ambition under the small sites disposal programme is some we will keep, some we will transfer to community. And we had a conversation last time about the community value as opposed to the financial value, and some that we will sell. And I hope that hopefully, if anything, you've picked up from the fact that what you've just said is actually the value of sales is relatively low. The benefit the community then, when those sites are transferred over without a sales price or transferred over to communities, is exactly what we're trying to demonstrate within the small sites disposal programme. And it is sometimes frustrating where sites come up for disposal, we need to determine value. What is the value that we are transferring over by sale or by direct transfer? And sometimes, I don't know whether it's a misunderstanding or perhaps somebody hasn't read the small sites workstream programme and the rationale behind it. The message sometimes get out perhaps in the local press that we're planning to put buildings on every single one of those small sites. That is exactly not true. And sometimes it's quite disappointing when I get rung up by residents who say, I've been enjoying a small area of space while my dog's walking, and I heard from somebody locally that you're going to put a block of flats on it. That is not the way that the small sites disposal programme works, and there has been plans in there. And hopefully, actually, the fact that you can see that the financial value, the capital value generated, actually just demonstrates that.
Thank you. Gordon, I just want to check, were you going to come in on disabled facilities grants, or have you got a completely separate point?
On disabled facilities grants, yes.
So I'll let you speak, and then I'll come back to Terry for his comeback, and then we'll go to Terry too.
Well, it is just, thank you for Councillor Cowing. He is exactly right. And I certainly did speak to the representatives from Norfolk County Council whilst they were here. But Norfolk County Council's hands, I know, are tied on this issue as well. If we're going to get additional grants, which is what I am hoping for and working hard for, they have to come from central government, because it is a central government fund that supplies the money for the disabled grants, or disabled facilities grants, I should say, even though it comes through Norfolk County Council. Even during this meeting, and whilst this debate has been going on, I have had a reply from Westminster this morning saying that because we have not been successful yet in getting additional money specifically for this work, which we take, they are taking it back to the Secretary of State, and that information has come through this morning. So Councillor Jeremy may well be encouraged that A, we are pressing as hard as we can, and B, that the MPs who represent Breckland in Westminster are also working to try and get some more money from us. I would like to see an additional 1.7 million to complete the work that we have before us at the moment. I don't know whether I'm going to get that, but that's the sort of figure I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry.
Yeah, just briefly, I appreciate Paul's comments there. I just fail to understand and see if the financial returns are so minimal, why are we doing it? There's a case in Thetford where the land is to be sold at auction, and a resident, because he doesn't want to see development on it, is going to buy it, and his intention is to leave it, not do anything with it. But he will then have the sole power, if he wants, to prevent access to the community, to put a fence around it. So even if there's no development, that piece of land will be lost to the community. That green lung, they won't be able to walk their dog, they won't be able to, enjoy it. We have a responsibility, I think, as Breckland Council, as custodians of the land, to keep it available for public good. Unless, there was a very pressing argument from a financial point of view to get a return or to change its use and develop it. And I fail to understand why such small returns are losing very valuable pieces of land, because once it's gone, we will never get it back.
Paul, I'll let you come back if you wish, and then I'll, Peter, thank you.
And my immediate comeback is that we have a responsibility as a district to make sure that all of the assets within our area are for the benefit of everyone, and not just the person who happens to be sat next door to it. As I said, if you want to use binary language, I think sometimes in a small sites disposal, whoever we is, will win, and sometimes we will lose if the value is extracted from another way. But the blunt reality is that we've got pieces of land that are of no strategic value to the district and to our residents as a whole. If, for instance, the town council would like to take that on because the land is within your town, I just think it's a very, very good idea.
Okay, thank you. I've got Roger, sorry, and then I've got Terry. So Roger first.
Thank you. Just a question for Alison, if I may. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
On the budget, though.
On the budget. Yeah. So on the capital program, I can see that there's projected income on the asset sale, and we all know what asset I'm talking about. But my understanding was that some of the money from that sale was going to be put back into revenue. Could you just show me or pinpoint me to where in this budget that revenue income from that sale is, please?
Yeah, thank you. You'll see in, I think it's Appendix E, the reserves. That is where the additional will go into. It's the organisational development reserve. And I think there's a comment about it in Appendix A, the medium-term financial plan.
Good knowledge. Good knowledge. That all right, Roger? I mean, you can check. And
I'll check, and then if I've got a further question, I'll do it outside this meeting. Thank you for that.
very good. Terry.
Following up on Terry's point about Breckland Bridge, he may not have too many sites in Borough Ward that are proposed for development, but I'm in Boudica Ward and there are a lot, and it would be heavily impacted. Speaking for residents, I'm very concerned. I'm about sort of pumping my own tyres too much. I probably canvass as much as anybody in this room. I've yet to speak to a resident who would be happy about further development in an already fairly intensive environment. I fully accept your point that the areas could end up as green sites for the benefit of the community, and we have to judge it as such. But I would offer the opinion that at present this is a real worry for my residents, and would ask that some words of calming, really, I guess.
And I can give those words. The only corollary is I've sometimes been asked from from a resident in Thetford, why am I paying for some open space for a dog walk to walk in Ashhill? And why am I paying for it? And the answer is, I think we have to balance rights and rules for everyone. And we will do that as best we can to the small sites disposal program.
Thank you. Tim, I know you've got one more point I think you want to make, and I have Peter, and then I have Fabian. Sorry. It's duly noted that your ward does not have a council dog walking area. Tim, then Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. So could I take you please to page 35 and the Evolve programme. So we've discussed this a number of times before and know that 22, 23, we've had some issue we didn't quite, was kind of underachieving, but I'm looking forward now as we go on, and it doesn't appear as if the Evolve programme is achieving our goals. And certainly 25, 26, we're looking at £500,000 deficit, year following £1 million deficit. What is the consequence of that? And are we going to be doing anything to fix it before that time? And I suppose kind of related into the consequences of possible funding threats. We've had a red on our risk register for the garden bin collection income. Again, what contingencies are we putting in place to ensure that, if that income does reduce, I doubt it will go to zero, but if it does reduce, what's the impact that that's going to have? I suppose just as a final sort of connected all in the same way, bearing in mind the number of complaints that we had, which we heard about in the Q3 performance report. A question would be, are we funding our statutory services efficiently? I'm thinking of environmental health and housing here, but elsewhere, is this budget actually allocating the right funds in the right places?
I think I know the answer to that question from the cabinet member. Phil.
Yeah, I guess you do, as do I. So starting at the end and working backwards, I can only say yes, we are. We are indeed funding our statutory obligations in the manner which any self-respecting and well-organised council should do. And that's shown by the fact that the budget is what the budget is at the moment. However, I would just draw us back to the, as the councillor has indicated, the question of risk. Risk is always there in any walk of life, and no different with us as a council. One of the biggest risks that we face is the fact that central government may well be about to impose on us a waste strategy which is completely alien to that which we're currently signed up to, both in Breckland and across the county. And that is a risk which we are trying to manage. We need to understand more about it. But that will actually have an impact on the point you just raised, which is about garden bin income. Garden bin income makes a significant contribution to us here. I believe that the representations that we are making at Westminster relating to the waste contract principles is such that garden waste will still sit with district councils, thank goodness. Other sorts of waste collection services, which may well be unified across the country, let alone the county, will actually come with some form of new burdens funding. But until we know the detail, we don't know that. So risk becomes a question that we have to develop and understand in all its guises. As far as the Evolve programme is concerned, the Evolve programme is, and I suppose the key is in the word, we used to call, previously the iteration was efficiencies. It's now called Evolve for a very good reason, and that is that we look at how we might be doing things differently. It's a common thread throughout Norfolk, do differently. We do them differently in this council. And the Evolve programme is driven by how we may well change and massage, if you like, the services that both statutory and discretionary that we provide in such a way that they're provided in a more cost-effective manner. But as we look ahead, we know that some significant risks are facing us, and that's the business rate reset and the fair funding review, neither of which we have any control over, but both of which are likely to hit us if we look at that particular page you referred to in 25-26 and 26-27, which is why we see the funding gap growing there. That is not because we're not undertaking work in this council inefficiently or being a spendthrift. It is because other factors of which we are not blissfully unaware, but of which we are unaware in detail, are likely to hit us. And we need to be looking ahead at how we can manage those risks. And rest assured, the team are managing those risks. They are carrying out sensitivity analyses. They are doing what-if scenarios. We are keen to understand in 3 years' time where we might sit as a council. Right now, we're sitting in a relatively comfortable position. And I'm very pleased to say that. I say relatively comfortable because we have a balanced budget. Yes, it is a duty for us to provide a balanced budget, but some councils can only provide a balanced budget by cutting services. This council is providing a balanced budget by enhancing services and providing discretionary services. And we are continuing to do that. So the balanced budget is a true balanced budget. We are not cutting any services in order to achieve it. Looking ahead, we know we have a fairly large sum to find. And as you can see there, the potential future gap is 500,000, then close on 1 million. You also heard today that we've just received notification from central government that we have additional funds coming into us. Those additional funds are not allocated in detail. They are put into, they're going to go into the, proposed to go into the growth reserve fund in order for us to be able to use it in a way that assists what we're trying to do at the moment and provide good quality services across the board, together with balanced discretionary services, which will support those most vulnerable. So my answer to you on Evolve, and I don't know if Alison wishes to add anything to this, is that it is an evolving service. It's an evolving process. We think we know where we're going at the moment based on all the information that's available to us, but that might change in the future. Alison, do you wish to add anything?
Thank you. Just one thing on the 25-26 onwards is that we don't know what the funding changes will be. So those are purely estimates. They could go up, they could go down. So again, it's a watching the consultations and seeing what comes out from government.
And just to support that, we're being prudent in flagging it up. You know, we could equally say, well, we know something might happen. We don't know whether it's going to be high, low or medium. So let's not bother about it. We are bothered about it. We are concerned. We do wish to look at it and flag it up, highlight it. So we all know in the council what our direction of travel may need to be in the future. It's quite simple. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything, Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I think it is it's very useful to know that the additional funding that we've heard about today actually covers the potential shortfall in the future. That's very rewarding that there's a nice balance there. It's about the. I understand, yes, and it is good that we are able to look forward in the way that we are. It's just that we are pushing problems that we already recognise further down the line. So our balanced budget is kind of borrowing a bit from some problems in the future. That's the way I was reading it, and perhaps we could do a bit more. But fortunately, the new funding does help us out.
Thank you.
I must come back on that. We're not pushing things down the line at all. We're being proactive. We have a budget which has been carefully worked through, and we're at a position where we know what we know now. We don't know what we don't know for the future, and we are cutting our cloth, if you like, accordingly. So we're not pushing things down the line. We're doing what we can to preserve our balanced budget, together with the quality and number of services, both statutory and discretionary, that we're providing, given all the facts that are available to us as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's just to try and reassure members and the public who might be listening that the small sites is used as green spaces at the moment. They do have to go through rigorous planning applications, and we did protect one last week at planning where we rejected it against officers' recommendation for. We refused it against officers' recommendations for approval, which was a piece of land used for green space. And I had two in one of my villages in my ward where I spoke with officers and negotiated, if you like, that's the right word, and had them removed from this auction. And my next stage will be to go and see and get them as community assets. So there is light. It's not all doom and gloom for these sites.
Thank you. I don't have any more members wishing to speak unless anyone wishes to indicate. Fine, thank you. In which case we note the report and thank you very much for coming and giving us all of that. I will move us on to the next item, which is item 9, outside body feedback. Do any members have any outside body feedback they'd like to bring to the attention of the committee? Peter.
Just a quick one, Chairman. I'd like to thank officers for releasing over £107,000 for the skate park in Watton. I can tell you that myself and the Brecon Youth Advisory Board have been championing this and lobbying for this for the last 5 or 6 years. The money comes from a planning site in Watton, which I recognise the 106 funding was needed for outside, to be used on outside space, and it's now come to fruition. So just let the members know.
Thank you very much. Any other members outside body feedback? Seeing none, thank you. Item 10 is scrutiny call-ins. We have none. Item 11 is councillor call for action. None for this meeting. Item 12 is the work programme. Would members, and we can just do this as a sort of indication unless members feel strongly, but are members happy to add onto a TBC date Inspiring Communities presentation, so we can have a presentation on that? Councillor Turner, you wish to speak on this exciting item?
I do. I think it would be more useful for such a presentation to come after a full council meeting when we've got more people there, because often these 10-minute, 15-minute soundbite things are more useful when you've got a captive audience. So let's spread the word a bit wider than ONS.
Are members content that we don't put it on the work programme, and we ask the cabinet member if she might arrange for it to be presented after a full council meeting? Tim.
Comment would be that it would serve a different purpose, because if it comes to OSC, then we're here to scrutinise and drill down and look at detail and quiz it. That may not be the case if it is a mere presentation after full council.
A fine point. It's tightly balanced. Alison, what do you want to say about this?
I don't mind doing both, but it is what it is. Right, my thoughts straight away is, Linda, thank you for that. It's a really good idea. However, there's this is put on live. It's on YouTube, isn't it? It's for the public. I think it would be also good for the public to see what Inspiring Communities have done. So let's shout about our successes as a council, and this would be a good opportunity to do it. I don't mind if anybody wants to ask questions about it, because I am confident that my team have done a damn good job, and I will say it. So I don't mind doing both. I think, you know, as I said, it's getting out there in the public's good.
It's almost suspicious when a cabinet member wants to come to scrutiny. Why don't we do both? Shall we put it on the work programme for a TBC date, and then separately I will leave it up to Alison and maybe Linda to organise a separate member briefing on the item, and then this committee can determine whether or not it's as much of a success as the cabinet member asserts that it is. Members content with that? Good, fine. Any other items that members want to add or subtract from the work programme? Fabian.
I just wonder if that'd be interesting to have a appraisal of the levelling up bid, because you know, it's a bit interesting why we didn't, and in other places there doesn't seem no for. I'd like to have the officer's opinion why some people succeeded and others failed. It's not on Breckland, just a wider thing, so we can perhaps have bake-up, please.
Okay, we can get that added as well. We'll catch up with officers afterwards to see when an appropriate date might be to bring that forward to the committee. Any final comments on this? No, thank you. Which brings me on to the next meeting. Now it says in black type that it will be the 9th of March 2023. I have had a request that this be postponed to the 22nd of March 2023 in order to facilitate scrutiny going before, cabinet going before scrutiny, and then scrutiny being before full council, to allow any call-ins if they were forthcoming. If members are agreeable, that is what I will do. Linda.
I'm afraid we've already booked the 22nd for an extra GP meeting. So you'd either have to have it at a different time in the day.
Are you in the morning or in the afternoon?
I've got 2 PM in the afternoon.
So we can do it in the morning.
We could do it in the morning, but
and we're always prompt in this committee anyway.
Yeah, just to warn members, they'll have a long day.
Okay, fine. Are members happy for that to be moved? I think it's for the best, given the arrangements of cabinet and full council. And of course, we need to try to avoid being in purdah, which starts on the 30th. So if members don't object vociferously, that's what I'll agree. I see no vociferous objections. Very good. In which case, I have nothing more to say than to close the meeting and thank everyone for their attendance.